Note for editor, I'm gonna sneeze a lot. Please edit this out. Or keep it in if it works for the yucks. Hi, it's Kendall here. If you're new around here, welcome. If you're not new around here, what is up, home skillet biscuit? I would first like to say that I'm in a very Meryl Streep death becomes her type of mood recently. And so everything I've been doing and saying feels very dramatic and very artful. So if I seem a bit more condescending today than usual, that is why. Also, my vocal fry is also a little stronger than usual because I'm being taken out by the Ides of April. Pollen season. Spring. Anyway, so a few weeks back, I told you guys that I had fallen down a rabbit hole that I have currently been in for months. And Lord knows I love a rabbit hole. And a few of you guys said, Kendall, you don't have to go down the rabbit hole alone. This can be more than just your weird fixation that you've been on for the last few months researching something. Why not make it into a video where I can bother you guys with it? You don't say. You're so kind. Oh my God. So that's what we're doing today. One thing about me, I am a curious cat, and you start off with an innocuous question, and before you know it, you're going down the meme cycle. Somehow you end up on Reddit, and what started off as innocuous and humorous slowly takes up 6 months of your life and ends in a way that you probably expected would, but also may not. Rabbit hole. And today's rabbit hole is about NOFAP. That's right, baby. I'm going to talk about NOFAP. I would say that NOFAP is certainly not something that my demographic would particularly be interested in, considering over 80% of my viewers identify as women. And I would argue probably that last 11% is just somebody's boyfriend / non-binary people that don't identify as women. I say all that to say, I don't think that my content generally lends to appeal to the average stereotypical man that would go on a NOFAP journey. But that's kind of the fun of it. That's how little confused leftist over here, is going down the rabbit hole to figure out how the did we get here, baby? I remember the curiosity started back in October when I was curious about the upcoming NOFAP November and where that came from. And if you go very superficially, it's just about a funny play on No Shave November, which is used to raise money for cancer. And this is just like a play on that, where it becomes a challenge where you don't nut. I don't know how this video is going to get monetized for the month of November. And so I was just researching the origins of that. And before you know it, we're 6 months later and we're making this video. I think before we get started, though, I have to make a pretty distinct disclaimer that I am in no way pro NOFAP. I'm actually very pro FAP. I FAP regularly. I don't think I could be any more anti-fapping if I could. It's one of the few healthy things that I do that I actually enjoy, this and sleeping, and they're usually connected. I personally don't observe nutless lifestyle in any capacity. If anything, I think November is the time to rev it up better than ever before, baby. Go harder, go stronger than ever before. Ow, that hurt. Thus, I will topically send us over to today's sponsor, who will help you in that endeavor. Hello everyone, this is Adroll Kennie, and today's video is sponsored by Lalo. Lalo has swiftly, without challenge, become my favorite sex toy brand. First of all, they're beautiful, luxurious. They have a gorgeous design, and they're kind of like art pieces in and of themselves. But then let's also talk about how they're innovative, worth writing to your friends about and recommending. That I've done. Their sort of mentality around self-pleasure very much so aligns with how I feel about it, that it's nothing to be ashamed of, nothing to stigmatize, and instead is a very educational, enlightening, beautifying exploration of yourself so that you can know and understand yourself while you're alone or when you're with a partner. It's very meditative, helps with sleep, brightens your mood. It's just great. Makes you feel good, makes you feel sexy. Now, what made me fall in love with Lalo is the Enigma Wave. I just bought a second one of these because I wanted the one in black. This thing is fire, okay? If someone were to ever ask me what my favorite is, it's definitely this one. It has triple stimulation. It's a bit intense if you're not used to toys in general, but I'm a bit of a connoisseur personally. I highly recommend it. You got this. I believe in you. I have also really enjoyed the Lalo Dot. They've also come out with travel sizes these days. There's the travel size of the Lalo Dot, and also they have a Lalo Sona 2 travel, and they're both all the power and ingenuity and efficacy of the full size, but they're travel friendly and they have a travel lock on them. So that's also very cool. It's bendable and can fit your body like a glove. It's 100% waterproof, so you can use it in the bath or the shower. And the charge is super impressive. Oh, this is not them saying this. This is me from experience, baby. You could go a hot 5 hours. You didn't hear from me. A number of pleasure settings. You can customize the feel for you. And if you want to, you might be able to get it for free, because currently Lalo is doing a promotion where if you click on the link down below, they're giving away 1,000 free toys, baby. Plus coupons and discounts. So look that way too. So again, if you would like to check out Lalo, click on the link down below. And big thanks to Lalo for sponsoring today's video. So now let's get on to the debauchery. Am I looking orange or am I looking? So one more disclaimer before we really get into the meat and potatoes of today's video. I will be talking a lot about medicine, psychology, health, sociology, etc. And I think it's only appropriate to say in the context of a video like this, where we're talking about a lot of things that I am no professional in, I think it's important to say that I'm not a professional. And again, I'm opening this telling you I'm biased as honestly, if they found out that fapping caused cancer tomorrow, it'd be easier to quit cigarettes. And I say this to say that my thoughts and perspectives, observations are in no way professional. They are opinions of some chick in Michigan who, again, has spent the last 6 months wasting her time. Chapter 1, if you will. NOFAP, an amalgamation. So when I say the term NOFAP, I think it's possible for a lot of people to understand it as varying levels of severity and varying modalities and psychology around the concept of abstaining from. So there's NOFAP as in subreddits, internet forums, that type of modality of talking to other people who are, for whatever reason, abstaining and for however long. There's people that I like to refer to as the challengers. Those are people that are probably just doing it for No Nut November as a fun little challenge for a month and don't go much further into a lifestyle, for instance, of abstaining from fapperoning. Let's back up a little bit. What is fapping? There's a subsect of people that don't even know what fapping is. Let's back up. So NOFAP is in reference to abstaining from masturbation, particularly for any amount of time, for any particular reason. And this reason and amount of time can vary generally. There's those that do it as a bit of a challenge. Usually those people for No Nut November that are just like playing around with it. It's a fun little innocuous thing to test your sense of self-control or whatever. There's the people that stay to NoFap Reddit, subreddits, people who just keep to internet forums, but maybe aren't super intense. And then there's people who observe a lifestyle of no fapping, a philosophy even, a spirituality around it. They turn it into a way in which they see life, health, strength, purity, worthiness, which is really concerning, and notably manliness. But note that throughout this video, I'm going to use NoFap largely for everyone who takes a non-casual approach to avoiding. So this isn't really focused on people who do it for funds, you know, for the month of November, even though they are who originally brought me down the rabbit hole. Speaking of the innocuous NoFap November, like I said earlier, it's a spinoff of the philanthropic No Shave November that was actually meant to raise money and awareness for cancer. And No Nut November is simply a funny iteration of that to avoid nutting throughout the course of November. It doesn't seem to have some grander charitable purpose other than the joy of knowing that you were able to abstain for that long. And again, I kind of thought of it as just a fun little innocuous challenge, like New Year's resolutions or that time you tried keto. But upon further research, I found that abstaining for November is but the tip of the iceberg, a small iteration of an overall physical and political ideology that is just a small part of a much bigger and much more dangerous subculture of male-focused content on the internet. Because again, some people don't just avoid nutting for November, they avoid nutting for life. And in the hopes of trying to encourage themselves and others to take on this life, there's a sort of evangelizing of NoFap that takes place. And that's where things get really icky. Because again, if one singular person decides that for whatever real or imagined reason, that avoiding is their necessary way to go about life. That's your choice. Who cares? However, again, there is a sort of evangelizing going along with this. And there are some very interesting social political forces at play here that makes taking a look at NOFAP in the broader social context of galvanizing young men and boys into, spoiler, fascism, misogyny, homophobia, racism. They all find their ways teetering down these echo chambers. But again, I'm getting a bit ahead of myself. The NOFAP forum, particularly in its early days, were very much so focused on two general groups of men, though I'd imagine they'd overlap often. There are those who wanted to improve their physical health, raise their strength, increase muscle growth, raise their testosterone levels. And then there was another subsect of men who were addicted to and wanted to take a cold turkey approach to ridding themselves of that problem. The NoFap subreddit was kind of birthed from a study that showed that avoiding can raise your testosterone some X amount of percent, and it really got a lot of guys interested in it, particularly if you were into weightlifting or building up muscle and needing that testosterone peak to help you do that.
A Chinese study actually found that for some reason, on day 7 from abstaining from any form of ejaculation, our testosterone levels spiked to 145% of their baseline levels. The best way to describe day 7 for me is, in charge. Like the kingpin of a mob. Like you know everything is going to go your way and that the world is your oyster.
Now, with that said, there's a lot of mixed science on that, and there's no real conclusivity I've found in regards to that. I think the most likely truth is that there's a spike in testosterone for some amount of time, but eventually it probably wanes out and your benefits are swiftly lost. But hey, again, I'm no doctor, but I've heard some scientists along the way say varying levels of it's true or not true. Again, as no professional, I doubt it. With that said, there's been a long-standing history of myths around sex and orgasms and how avoiding one or both can increase a man's stamina, increase a man's strength, testosterone, mental clarity.
I found myself doing much better during social interactions. I found myself being able to hold longer eye contact. I was more lively. I had more fun, and it seemed like others enjoyed my company more than usual. It became much easier to jump out of bed and get the day started.
And these myths have been around since the time of the ancient Greeks and Romans, honey. So the concept, though not supported really in scientific research, is by no means new. To me, it just sounds like a bunch of bullshit that is meant to give guys some prescription on how to be more manly. We'll talk more about the physical health benefits, quote unquote, of NoFap, but I want to touch more a bit on those who are doing it as a therapeutic approach to stop their issues with compulsory or watching a lot of. Like I said, the early part of NoFap was focused on helping these people as well. Let me rephrase, men who were struggling with and issues, but in lieu of like recommending psychotherapy, sex therapy, addiction therapy, seeing if maybe there's something going on with dopamine or serotonin, maybe something ADHD related, many NoFappers have decided on a lifelong cold turkey approach. Now, personally, I don't agree with this approach. Again, I'm biased, but also from what I've seen, it's not really proven to be effective or beneficial. It's just abstaining without getting to the root of the issue. I have, in some cursory research, I found that abstaining for a period of time in addition to other therapy can have something to do with treatment, but it's certainly not the treatment, at least what I've seen. But with that said, many of the men who venture into NoFap speak about their lives being shaken up by addictions and finding this community of people who are struggling in a way similar to them. It's helpful in theory. It's a good thing in theory, but much like anything intended for good, the internet will turn it into something absolutely asinine and terrible. Rest assured. And if the NoFap community were simply a bunch of guys who, support each other and encouraging each other to have healthier relationships with sex and self-pleasure, I wouldn't be making this video now, would I? However, as I soon found out, within NoFap, you hear a lot of these very harmful and concerning and often violent dogma that has existed again been around human sexuality for years, hundreds and hundreds of years at this point. However, in the days of the internet, that harmful and violent rhetoric and misinformation is more accessible, more profitable, organized, and actionable than ever before. Again, this is a very big topic, and I went back and forth about what angle I wanted to tackle this topic in for months. And I think my focus in this video is to ask, what type of person decides to join a community devoted to avoiding self-pleasure? What are they in search of that they think denying themselves pleasure is a penance or a sacrifice worth making? And from my very, again, professional research, I noticed that there are several very general reasons for taking on a life of faplessness. The first candidate, men, quote unquote. So you may have noticed that I have referenced NOFAPers or NOFAP as a community of men. And that is very much so something that cannot be ignored. And I'm using air quotes for a reason, because not only is the NOFAP community markedly full of men, particularly very young men, it's also very prescriptive in the ways in which it defines manliness, manhood, an actualized man. And very quickly, my ears started ringing and I said, oh, this is going to get into some manosphere bullshit, isn't it? And, spoiler alert. Oh my God, the weight on my back for being psychic. And I think as a woman, I'm conditioned to consider mostly the ways in which women are policed sexually by society. But I think NOFAP presents a very particular way in which men specifically are policed in their sexuality. I find that women's sexuality is often policed by men, but so too is men's sexuality. Have you ever seen two talk about what is gay and what isn't? And it's everything except another man. Like, you can't wear blue on Tuesday, that's gay. You put clear polish on, little fruit cup, like what the hell? But because when we talk about male sexuality, there's often this sort of encouragement for men to have as much sex with as many women as possible, because that's like good for them, apparently. You know, it's like, go out there, sow your royal oats, be a man, get but what's interesting about this, which is the explicit opposite, like get no don't touch it, is that I expected it to be somewhat of like a emasculating thing to do NOFAP. And I found that it was quite the opposite. It's not this sort of neutering of male sexuality, but within the NOFAP community, the result is still them policing other men's behavior, but saying that no, men that have all this sex and all the time and watch a lot of are weak and gay, all the other derivatives of saying not manly. Instead, a lot of NOFAPers think of abstaining as a way to harness your power as a man. And though I'm sure there's a sprinkling of a woman here or there in the forums, because yeah, whatever. But odds are, if you're in there, you're looking for very male-centric, man-centric takes on trying to live this fapless life in all the ways that you want to do it. I will say personally, as a person who's gone down this rabbit hole, I have yet to see a singular woman, not one. But I cannot stress enough, this harnessing of sexual power, abstaining for the purpose of health and vitality has been going on for years. They've been bullshitting y'all for years on that, okay? Back in the 18th century, Swiss physician Tissot believed that masturbation caused illnesses, that it was an illness in and of itself. Later, it was hypothesized that a lot of the illnesses he thought everybody was getting from masturbation was actually just untreated STDs, probably, of the time. But there's also Benjamin Rush, who said that masturbation caused blindness. That's funny. The whole world would be blind. And of course, the funniest one, the invention of cornflakes and graham crackers, which were made for the explicit purpose of being so bland that it would kill your libido. But the past 200 some odd years of research has concluded that none of these are correct, and that not only very normal, it's incredibly healthy, it's fine. In many ways, the phenomenon of pathologizing is rooted in morals. It's not a science basis. There's no real reason scientifically to avoid it. It's literally just some guy said, hey, this is dirty And now it is. And now we all live in this puritanical, reductionist era around human sexuality. Not to mention, if you are doing a NOFAP life or whatnot and you slip up, oh, imagine the shame associated with it. God. Say all that to say that demonizing has long existed and now is simply taking on a modernized form in a very confusing to me, but incredibly campishly masculine form. Take, for instance, this clip advertising a course meant to free men from.
I'm rolling in.
I don't like a lot of the imagery that they use. It's giving Euro-nationalism, sweaty.
Not yet, Ethan is online. I have a whole segment devoted to that. But I'm here particularly to note the weird war imagery.
We're not going for short-term band-aid stuff. We're going for permanent leadership. As a king, you have a power. That power is to declare war.
What? Why does he have tanks behind him?
You're gonna rebuild your sexuality. You're gonna rebuild your church. You're gonna rebuild your community. You are not a struggler. You're a king of God who got in bondage, who is now free, declaring freedom.
Tough men live a life free of self-pleasure. Only weak men cause strong men know where they're going. But there's something in the ways in which men are encouraged to start and stay in a life without. They market it in a way that's particularly male. And I'm sitting here again, I'm a woman, I'm a girl. Again, a lot of Meryl Streep this morning. I found it fascinating to kind of observe the type of men who would go towards something like this, right? It's a course that you pay money for to help you not. So like what drives a person to start something like this? Because training programs are meant to improve something, to fix something, to strengthen something, to fix whatever is innately broken or lacking in men, return them to a time of quote unquote real men, whenever the that was, whether that be their inability to meet and talk to women, mental health issues, inability to have an enviable physique or be endlessly productive or make a lot of money. NOFAP is marketed to these men as an overly simplistic salve to heal men alone. It appeals to men specifically because of the ways in which men have been promised and failed by patriarchy. Note that none of these issues are limited and specific to the men bemoaning them. Plenty of women and non-binary people have struggle with their body image or struggle with depression and anxiety, finding a romantic partner, feeling really lonely in today's day and age. Also, women and non-binary people and watch porn. Some may even have a damaging compulsion towards it. But again, NOFAP is staunchly a rallying cry for men. And that's why they are almost always the only people addressed within the community. It's for men that grew up in a world that said, if you follow certain steps, you will have money, success, prominence. Women, note that women is included with other things that are also inanimate, like objects, literally. There's an entire rabbit hole of NOFAP grifting that I could go down. But again, we're trying to keep this to one video, baby. So, and that will bleed us way into the manosphere and the whole subsect of men capitalizing off of the insecurity of men and boys and using misogyny, violent misogyny to do it. So anyway, it comes as no surprise that for those that choose to partake in a lifelong journey of faplessness, that they would also be anti as well. And again, if these men had come in with an addiction to or perceived addiction to, it doesn't shock me that the forum is filled with people who aren't fans of. They have very strong negative feelings about it. Talk of it as emasculating and weakening, and avoiding it is a true test of strength, right? Weak men succumb to the lure of their own penis and their eyes, but a true man can say no, big booty, big booty Judy. I ain't spanking it to that. I'm a real man. Now, like I said before, if you as a singular person want to avoid or watching I do not care. I don't think anyone should care. That's for you specifically. Especially if you're finding that you're having issues with compulsory, maybe partaking in either of those in inappropriate places. By all means, do what you need. I recommend seeing a therapist, but however, much like how going full NOFAP doesn't help with whatever issue you have with compulsive masturbation without therapy to get to the root of the problem, so too do I think avoiding in general also doesn't help either. Not to mention the thing that I'm more concerned about, which is like the general movement of men who are sexually repressed and taught that sexuality and the people that make it, strike that, the women that make it, sex workers, the women that make it are a problem that is keeping them weak, neutered, and docile. I could see that causing some issues. But again, more on that later. 2, those who want superpowers. This personally is my favorite part of this whole rabbit hole because I find this very, very funny, though disturbing as all of it is, but this is very funny to me. So the concept of men trying to earn manhood or toil for manliness is, again, nothing new. But there is this interesting subsect of people within the NoFap community that have used a lot of interesting mixes of spirituality and mysticism and cherry-picked some things from Eastern religion and created their own particular justifications for avoiding masturbation. And it is ripe with pseudoscience, and it's very, 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 very funny. Regurgitation of old myths, about how it makes you weak and docile and yada yada. But some of my favorites are these particular anecdotal effects of NoFap that I discovered down the rabbit hole, including, but not limited to, again, the debatable increased testosterone and muscle growth, increased confidence and discipline, increased state of well-being, more motivation, quote, mental superpowers, more mental clarity and focus, more energy, less need for sleep. Okay. Less depression, thicker hair, deeper voices, faster healing and repair of muscles, wounds, and bone fractures. Okay, back on the testosterone thing, I've heard, again, varying takes on how true that may or may not be. I've seen that this spike in testosterone, though it does exist, is short-lived, so it doesn't really do anything. If it was meant to improve muscle growth, it doesn't really last long enough to do that. You're not going to become liver king by refraining from beating your meat. You can only do it the way that he did it, taking a ton of steroids. But the benefits don't stop there. When you are giving away some of your own life force and vitality. I even saw one guy on TikTok say that beating your meat makes it smaller.
And I'm gonna just say this, bro. The more you beat your meat, the more your shit gonna shrink. The more pencil tip you gonna have. You're gonna have pencils tip. Because there is no blood flow going through.
Some even go as far as to say that the energy that you save can be transmuted into other things. And that transmutation is so powerful. It's so powerful that you can open your third eye and enter the quantum realm.
Basically, your third eye is a gateway to the quantum realm, like your Ant-Man or some shit.
This energy is literally the gateway to all progress. It is the fuel that forces pineal gland to be activated, pineal gland to be activated, pineal gland to be activated, which is like an antenna that receives divine information and experiences from the unified field, or quantum realm, or infinite intelligence. Name it what you will, but it receives knowledge that is not of this world. Therefore, it is called the third eye, because it sees what you cannot see from your mortal eyes.
I stopped beating my and then I could fly. It is a way to reach consciousness that you never thought was humanly possible. With that being said, if you are spending, again, your entire day beating your meat, you have a problem. That, again, I don't think should be handled without medical intervention. Same thing with if you're spending all day, every moment, every interaction you have with humanity, especially women, is circumvented through your lack of understanding of humanity and instead you have a problem. So yes, go talk to a professional about that. But doing NoFap is probably not going to fix either of those. All it's going to do is frustrate you and make you mad when you most likely can't do it for as long as forever. But my personal favorite is the thought that refraining from a makes you hotter.
That was the word, Captain. I think I caught you naked.
The theory is that, quote, if you do not, it tells your body that you are too ugly to mate. And because you are so hit that no one wants to reproduce with you, your body absorbs the nutrients and uses it to make you hotter so that you can have sex and reproduce. This is why, in theory, your skin will get clearer by no-fapping, your muscles bigger, your voice lower, your facial hair grows in more evenly, I've heard from some. Oh boy. Love that. There's little medical evidence to support any of these. Shocker? Are you shocked? I'm astounded. The NoFap folks regurgitate a lot of the old myths about how refraining from masturbation helps them to be more energetic, more sexual, more virile, and more manly. That's a little sad. They've now paired it with the new modern worship of brain science, making lots of extrapolations on weak science to argue that has a disproportionate effect on the brain. They are also now linked with moral groups who oppose on feminist and religious grounds and use the same brain-based language to mask that these are actually moral arguments, not medical ones. And this ludicrousness, as you imagine, is what led me further down the rabbit hole, because the premise that the excess in your body will fill you like a lithium battery until you can shock the world with Thor-like powers, rain down from the heavens and bring forth a new, stronger, more masculine world. That's so dumb. Okay. But again, NoFap isn't necessarily the smallest coalition of sorts of men. So obviously some people believe this on some level or another, but that's really concerning because again, a lot of these men go into stuff like this with the pure intentions of trying to kick a bad addiction, and instead they're led down a pipeline of anti-science, which, shocker, leads to anti-medication, anti-vax, which leads to all the other anti-stuff like anti-gay, anti-women, anti-trans. I'm saying this to say, just as everything, go down the pipeline long enough and you'll come out the other side of the sewer, aka the alt-right. Many of those that venture into NoFap are doing it to find simple answers to life's very difficult questions, particularly around attraction, connection, finding lovers and partners, healing some self-worth issues, healing relationships with your body and your sexuality, and how that relates to the world around you. If you're a man, a heterosexual man in particular, how that shows up in how you interact with women. There's a lot there that is confusing and bewildering. And though it is something that, again, we can all possibly understand on some level or another, this quest for knowledge is prone to be perverted by weird pseudoscience, Puritan, fringe extremists, and grifters. And though, again, NoFap had its roots in healing men's relationship with sex and masturbation, I think the thing that is probably more accurate is that by and by, it's either by design or by consequence associated with policing behavior, encouraging sexual uniformity. And that, my friends, leads us to fascism. NoFap preys on the already present insecurities of men looking to, quote unquote, test themselves, to prove themselves as worthy men who can work themselves into being worthy of receiving, quote unquote, benefits that make that type of repression worth doing, even if those benefits, again, are not real. And anything that distracts said men from their ideal manhood is malign and disavowed. And again, instead of looking inward, getting a therapist, perhaps seeing the ways in which your insecurities and issues with relationships / sex can be something that you can be worked on and worked through with a therapist or other mental health professional. Instead, what happens is if you go down the pipeline long enough, we start blaming non-white people, women, particularly those who participate in sex work, even more extreme, those who aren't virgins and thereby are whores. Just giving away your for free or for money. We're mad at both the LGBT community, the LGBT community, and again, blaming black people and Jews, because we always got to put that in there somehow. Or, as Dr. David Lay says very concisely, this no-nut ideology is a creepy little smorgasbord of insecurity-driven hate with anti-Semitism, misogyny, and homophobia all rolled up in one. He has a way with words. Yup, not beating your is racist. And I'll tell you how. If you need an excuse to do it tonight. You really think about it and you're talking about Puritan ideas around sex masturbation. It's only natural that the alt-right is in some way or another a nesting ground for that. A nesting ground that creates a even more rigid framework, if you will, around those beliefs around sexuality, masculinity, religion. And they come together again to offer this very appealing and very simplistic rule book on what it takes to be a more perfect and more manly man. An actualized man, the man that achieves all that is promised to him in patriarchal society. But NOFAP and its relation to the alt-right really does exemplify that much of the NOFAP community is, one, very young and very white. There is a notion amongst the alt-right that men are literally mechanisms designed by them. It's anti-Semitic, if you wondered. Destroying Western civilization because neuters white men specifically by making them less and less interested in having actual relationships. Thus, they spend their time watching progressively more taboo, including trans, gay, black. Young white men become addicted to at an early age to the point where they're less and less interested in or even capable of actual sex. Furthermore, these young men's addiction drives them to pursue even greater highs as the they used to watch no longer works for them. So they end up hooking up. So they end up hooked on gay and trans and interracial featuring black men and white women. Whoa! Eric Sprankle, Associate Professor of Clinical Psychology, Sexuality Studies at Minnesota State University, says in a Vice article that of this rally against this includes the racist fears of white women having sex with brown-skinned immigrants, as well as apparently masturbating, especially to pornography. And of course, given their strong religious and nationalistic views, they're authoritarian, which leads itself nicely to wanting to unnecessarily over-control behavior of self and others. These are the drugs, quote unquote, of sort that many an addict is struggling to kick the habit of. And in that process, it would seem that the producers of said sexual content end up getting majority of the ire that should be put towards the social systems in place that make men feel like the only physical gratification they can get is sexual. But sure, blame sex workers instead of, I don't know, the society that made it so that men have no understanding of how to build closeness in relationships and build physical gratification, both including and not including sex, especially, I don't know, with women as well. They blame the women themselves and those that produce sexual content. It's a tried and true trend of blaming your issues on somebody else, blaming your issues on women for having consensual sex and being sexually attractive, then I don't know, maybe considering that your resentments are ill-placed. And don't get me started, if these young white men are attracted to the same sex, it's every gay fault from Thailand to Timbuktu. I don't know where Timbuktu is. It's every gay fault from here to Timbuktu and back around, bitch. Now, this isn't to say that there's only white no-fappers. Quite the opposite. I think because I was looking up on TikTok and TikTok knows that I'm a black person, it gave me a lot of black no-fappers. So they do exist. So let's not say that non-white no-fappers who spread a lot of this very harmful rhetoric don't exist. But I'm just saying, largely the community is very young and very white, and it is particularly galvanized under these white supremacist notions, anti-Semitic notions around the weakening of the white man as a concept and as a basis for a strong and civilized society, whatever that means. Going back to the fighter plane imagery, there is this sort of war zone type of hypervigilance that a lot of these that are abstaining seem to use. And it is, again, equal parts confusing and concerning and kind of funny and comedic. But you might be asking, as was I, what the did the Jews have to do with that? Why are Jewish people being blamed because you can't beat your meat? Like, what the does that have to do with anything? Well, allow me to explain. This comes from a long-standing belief that Jewish people's presence in the industry since the 1970s isn't motivated by anything other than profit and, again, harming Western civilization. Quote, the goal of this addictive material, supposedly, is to neuter and desexualize white men and ultimately doom the white race. This is where the alt-right theory of ties into the larger theory of white genocide. The immigration... Sorry. So up. The immigration of people of color into Europe and North America, coupled with the declining birth rate among white couples, will render white people a minority, if not altogether extinct. And then Jews will be the only high IQ race left in the West, leaving them free to control the black and brown masses. Oh, I'm sure, white supremacists, your concern is the black and brown masses. Oh, God. Quote, it's just the latest incarnation of a long-standing association of Jews with prostitution, STDs, and sexual perversion. He spent several pages of Mein Kampf bemoaning the spread of syphilis via Jewish pimps and prostitutes, which he feared would jeopardize the continuation of the Aryan race. The Nazis even had an umbrella term for prostitution, homosexuality, abortion, and other forms of sexual degeneracy, sexual Bolshevism, which, like the cultural Marxism the alt-right blames everything on, is just a short hop away from blaming the Jews. You need more evidence about how not beating your is actually kind of up. But that's not all, folks. It's not limited to 20th century bigotry. Oh no, even the Proud Boys has a decree in their bylaws about mass more than once a month, a rule dubbed no wanks, and all members must abstain from. But back to blaming the Jews. One of the through lines of fringe, like right-wing conspiracy is that the industry is part of a vast Jewish conspiracy. David Duke, associated with the KKK and white supremacy, suggests that was a Jewish conspiracy intended to serve as a weapon of revenge against European white men and societies. Duke argues that mass in fiction and film is a metaphor for Jewish behavior and cites Breitbart, an alleged by asylum seekers, as a way to argue against immigration. While looking further into the anti-Semitism associating with NOFAP as an ideology, I came upon the November 2018 Vice article titled, "Let This Year Be the Last No Nut November," which chronicled a fascinating and illuminating exchange between the site hamster and people so enraged by that they called for threats for killing, often with crude depictions of Jewish caricatures behind piles of money. Great. The followers of anti-immigration and anti-belief systems have been expressing similarly violent ideology for decades. There's a real and concerning connection between the far-right racism, white nationalism, and anti-immigration and anti-beliefs. So if we are to understand where this modern association with anti-Semitism and anti-immigration / comes from, just consider Wilhelm Reich. That's not how you say that. Wilhelm Reich. But more specifically, his legacy. So Dr. Reich was an ethnic Jew who believed in sexual liberation. This theology and ideology made him very much so a cultural icon, particularly in the 1960s after his death. And since his time, his thoughts and opinions around sex and sexual liberation, particularly the radical belief that women should enjoy sex, God forbid they should have sexual pleasure, have been a thorn in many a conservative's craw. His theories and fiercely anti-totalitarian stances grew very popular in various protest movements of the 1960s and 70s. And being that many of those on the right oppose these anti-authoritarian, anti-fascist, anti-sex ways of things, that along with him being Jewish and also the Jewish presence in the early part of the industry in the 1970s because there wasn't much barrier to entry. It's not a big jump for this Jewish thinker to be, a major cog in the grand Jewish conspiracy, to undermine the West, blah, 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 blah. I'm sure that I don't have to explain to my viewers why being anti-Semitic is bad, so I'm not going to go into that. But I will conclude here. What started off as a cute little question of where NoFap, November, came from, became a months and months long rabbit hole, baby, that led me in every direction. And I'm tired, admittedly. With that said, again, if you don't want to tug on your love slug because you want muscles, want to get hotter, want to help yourself with a harmful addiction without therapy for some reason, go for it. There's no scientific support for any of that, but hey, it's up to you. But it might just be a little piece of a much broader and more consequential social political atmosphere. If you don't want to masturbate or watch porn, that is your business. But be aware that sharing anti-pornography memes and attacking pornographers online is supporting a cause that is much bigger and more harmful than your. That's all for today, folks. I'm very passionate about the topic, if you hadn't noticed. If you like today's video and are curious of any other rabbit holes that I go down, because this is just the NoFap stuff, okay? And I had to take out all the stuff about like goat balls. Basically, there was a guy who, to increase male virility, he would put goat testicles into guys' testicles, and he was an amazing medical grifter who killed a lot of people. And he's also kind of why we have talk radio. That's neither here nor there. If you're ever interested in other rabbit holes I go down, because unfortunately I spend a lot of time in them because I have the adda hitter real bad. Put those down in the comment section. If you liked today's video, feel free to like it. Follow me on all my social media, Instagram and Twitter, both of which are KennieJD. Feel free to check me out on Connect the Dots. I think soon we're uploading the video of me interviewing Flavor Flav. I gotta rewatch Flavor of Love, because that shit was fire. I should do a video on Flavor of Love, man. Maybe after that video goes live. But yeah, so feel free to check that out. My wig is terrible, but my wig was really up in the video, but I don't care. I got to interview Flavor Flav. My wig was very up in that video, and it's very funny because Twitter will not let me live it down. And somebody took a picture from a clip from that and used it as their icon on Twitter, and they were being transphobic. And so I got roasted because people had me with a bad wig as the profile. And I was like, hey, that was very funny, but I'm getting hit and I ain't saying nothing. I'm not transphobic. I love the ligaments, all of them. I love the ligaments, don't. But it was very funny. Not ha, kind of sad, if anything. Like, ew, weird. Anyway, but yeah, so that's, look at the video when it's out, I guess. And feel free to subscribe to that. And I will see you guys next time. Peace.